So thank you all for joining. I'm Eric Wu. I'm one of the founders of Bracket Labs. Joining me here on the webinar, but kind of running the panel behind the scenes, is Blakely Graham, who probably between the two of us, many of you have spoken with in the past. We're really excited to be doing this webinar because we're actually going to be diving into our latest release. So, from a housekeeping point of view, this webinar is going to be about new features in the latest release of TaskRay. If you're joining because you're looking for a general overview or kind of just interested in TaskRay and want to learn more, you're more than welcome to stay on this call. You're going to learn some cool stuff. But next week at the exact same time, so Thursday morning next week, we will be doing a general overview, kind of a more broad introduction to TaskRay. So you'll probably also want to attend that webinar as well. Now, we are going to be taking a lot of questions throughout this webinar, and we're going to handle questions through the chat window in the GoToMeeting interface. So, as we're going through demos, as I'm talking about different features, and a question comes up, please feel free to type it in there. Blakely is going to be logging them, organizing them. We are going to stop after each feature and talk about feature-specific questions. So, whether it's a general question or whether it's feature-specific, just go ahead and get it into the chat window. And we'll take care of getting to it. From a timing point of view, this is probably not even going to run 45 minutes. It all depends on your questions and where we go with that. But we certainly are not going to take the full hour. So with all that said, let's dive in. I'm going to be kind of following our release notes off the blog as my roadmap for the webinar. And this also kind of also brings up a good point. Our blog is where we do a lot of publishing best practices. We always publish our release notes here. It's just a very good place to kind of keep up with what's latest and greatest, from TaskRay, but also from Bracket Labs in general. We do have a couple other apps that are out there. In fact, we just launched one yesterday. The blog is always just kind of a good way to keep up with us. So I'm going to be following along through this release notes post that came out last week, and the first feature we're going to talk about is one that is actually very near and dear to our hearts. We've been working on this one for a little while, and we know that a lot of customers have been looking for it, and this is repeating tasks. Now, repeating tasks are on the face really simple, and when we get into this, you guys are going to see we've designed it to be really easy to use, but the reason it took us so long is it's actually a pretty complicated feature to build. There's a lot of corner cases. So let's go ahead and demo the new feature. I'm going to be in our handy-dandy test drive. And as always, this test drive is available to you if you ever want to come and play with our sample data, mess around with what we've got set up here. It's, go to the App Exchange, click that Take a Test Drive link, and you can get to the same demo instance that we're using. And here's my sample Dreamforce project. I'm going to create a new task that we are going to make a repeating task. So let's just add that task, and I'm going to go ahead and quick add it. And there we go. And I'm going to pop that card open. And now notice, one of the things that's new in this release is we've added a second tab of navigation in the card layout. So this is controlling all the repeating behavior. I'm going to go ahead and go over that tab. Now, when we open it up on a new task, notice that TaskRay is telling us before you can actually set up repeating, you have to set a deadline. So that's the first thing to know about repeating tasks is before we have a date, set up with the task, we can't build the repeating job. So we're going to prompt you here to go ahead and set a deadline. Let's do that now. And let's go ahead and, we're going to set the first task due today. And go ahead and hit save. And so, while we're here, this is another small new feature that we've added. We've added a save and close button and changed the behavior of the save button. If any of you have ever wanted to save and edit and keep the card open, you know exactly why we did this. It used to drive me nuts during demos. So now we've got that. So we're going to actually hit save here and not close the card. When I do that, it saves our change. I'm going to go back here to the repeating task. And now notice on the repeating task tab, I can say this task either does not repeat or I need it to repeat daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. And let's just do this weekly. The next one here is asking me what's the interval. I could do it every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, etc. We're just going to do it every week. And just to make sure we have lots to play with, I'm going to run it out all the way through the end of February. All right. So let's go ahead and hit save and close on this. Now the behavior here, one of the complications of repeating tasks is we actually had to define for ourselves the difference between repeating and recurring. And it's important to note these are repeating tasks. And for us, what that means is this whole series of tasks is not going to be created. Instead, each one that repeats, as it finishes, the next one will be created. So notice here, our new repeating task has been created. It's got a due date of January 23rd, and there's a new symbol next to that due date showing me that it's recurring. So let's go ahead and complete it by dragging it over to the finish column. Now, when that's done, TaskRay is thinking about it, and then the next one gets created. And that's that repeating behavior I was talking about. As we finish each one of these tasks, a new one with the correct due date gets created. And so you notice, and this is all happening automatically. We're running a job, just to kind of calculate everything. So a couple things to note. The first is that, if I were to just keep completing all of these, it's going to run until the end of our deadline. But what if I were to delete this, right? What if I go in here, grab my trusty trash can, and instead of moving that to finished, I delete my latest task? Now what's happened is, from a TaskRay point of view, we just killed the repeating job, right? Everything that we had already created still exists. It's all still sitting here in the finished column, but TaskRay is now no longer tracking this for creation of additional tasks because the one that was still live was deleted, right? And that's going to be true even if I say this old one moves back out of non-finished status. So even though this one is no longer finished and it's back into active status, we didn't restart the job. So that's another little piece to remember about how this works. If you do need to restart the job, you're actually going to go back to that repeat tab and start it up again. So that's, otherwise this is as simple as it seems. We've really spent a lot of time thinking about making sure that this was really intuitive about how to schedule these repeating tasks. Our end goal obviously is that as TaskRay users, you don't have to think a lot about this. It just works like you expect it to. So that's the repeating task feature. Let's see if any questions have come in. Okay. Blakely's handing me notes. Can I set up a task that repeats the second Tuesday of every month? Not yet, but that's one that we are aware of as a use case and are considering. Again, as we thought about simplifying this, we tried to boil down to the major pieces of scheduling. So thanks for that. More validation of what we need to keep building, so thanks. And it looks like that was all the questions on repeating tasks. So I'm going to go back here. Next one. Oh, this is another cool one. Okay, so one of the things we're now doing in all the project displays is aggregating a chatter feed. And so this is, it's important to kind of get some distinctions here for those of you who really get into the details of how Salesforce works. The first thing to note is that we've added a new nav tab in the sidebar over here called Chatter. And I'm going to go ahead and switch to this. And what you see in this Chatter sidebar is an aggregation of all user posts happening inside this project from all the different tasks. So, the use case here would be, I'm very interested in this project, but I'm not so interested that I'm following every single task as a Chatter item, and instead I just kind of want to be able to pull up an aggregated view of what's happened recently and read through it. And that's what you're getting over here. Now, this is not in itself a Chatter feed, right? So this is not like an aggregated object, pulling in other feeds. Instead, this is an aggregated display. So each one of these posts is actually related back to wherever it came from. In this case, the top post came from the task called Schedule Kickoff Meeting. And if I were to click through, of course, I'm going to open up that record and get to that feed and get to all the details on that record. So instead, this is just a very easy, quick way for you to see that aggregation of activity. And this is pulling from every single task in the project. It's also pulling from the project itself. So you know that each project is also a record inside of Salesforce. It's got its own Chatter feed. If there's posts on the project's Chatter feed, they're going to show up here as well. And so that's the chatter, the aggregated chatter activity. You know, it's a handy thing there if you are, you know, forcing people to auto follow. That may be something you want to reinvestigate. Also handy, you know, just to kind of see what's happening. So let's see if there's any questions on this one. Okay. Unrelated question. You want to handle it now?
Yeah.
Okay. How do tags work? That's a tags for individual tasks. Let's open up one with lots of tags. And this is a great question because this is going to be in flux, and I'm guessing maybe the question even came because it is in flux. So right now, how we are handling tags is using the standard Salesforce tagging. And when I open up this card, this is a little interface we built, but it's built using the standard Salesforce tagging data. Right? And so right now, as I add tags, this is simply adding it right here onto the card, and you'll see that it's, you know, handled as a new blue label there on the card. Now, the reason I said this is in flux is because Salesforce is changing how they're thinking about tagging, specifically talking about chatter topics. And in fact, tagging, the standard tags that we who have been using Salesforce for a while, those are actually not going to be available for new Salesforce customers pretty soon. So we are going to be switching how we behave and moving over to using chatter topics in the same way. And we haven't quite got the design finished yet, but we know that's coming, and believe us, we're planning for it. Ultimately, we think chatter topics are probably a better way to handle this anyway. So you can eventually expect us to be using chatter tags in the exact same, or I'm sorry, chatter topics in the exact same way we use tags. Those of you who are using tags today, you know, there's going to be legacy support, the same way Salesforce is already kind of indicating to all of us that they're going to continue to support you. However, you know, moving forward, new customers on TaskRay and those of you who want to use topics will have support. Let's say another question on the tagging topic. Can I pull everything tagged with a certain name? That's also a great one. Not yet, but we know about this requirement, and you know, one of our big initiatives for this year is kind of a major refresh of our UI, and along with that, we'll be filtering based on tagging coming. So not only filtering based on tagging, but a lot of filtering and sorting features that are all getting designed into the new UI. We're really excited about what's coming there. Safe harbor, safe harbor, safe harbor. First half of this year, we're hoping to have it ready. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'm going to move to the next major feature. And we've actually already talked about this, so I'm not going to go through it again, but we added this save and close button, and we changed the way that the save button performs. So now save will not close the card, save and close will actually save and close it. So this is great if you're making edits but need to leave the card open. Next one, the quick undo. You may have already seen this one as we've been moving things around, but let's just grab this and move it. And notice anytime I make a drag and drop action now, I've got a little pop-up here that gives me the option to quick undo. And this is going to apply to me moving things around. This is going to apply to me changing owners. It's going to apply to me deleting. As an example, let's go ahead and delete all these new repeating tasks. And by the way, I always like to show this off. For some of you older TaskRay customers didn't have this when we started. We do have multi-select on the boards now. So I just selected these three cards by holding down the control key on my laptop. For those of you who are Mac users, that's your Apple key. And you can actually select, you know, batches of cards here, and then when we drag our trash can onto those, all three are going to be deleted. And notice when I did that, 3 tasks were deleted. Click to undo, pops up here. You know, this is lingering here roughly 10 seconds. What we've noticed is, you know, you eventually just kind of, your eye learns to skip over it, but it's really great to have when you do need it, when you've accidentally deleted something or made a change that you want to revert. So that's there now. Moving down the list, this one's a real minor one, but for those of you who asked for it, I'm sure you're happy that it's here. We are now giving you the option to suppress the ownership change emails. This was a minor one that we heard, but when we did hear about it, people were in pain, so we're happy to be able to add it. This is just accessed under preferences here, and it's this last checkbox. Now, I do want to be really clear about how this works. If I were to check this box, what's happening is me as a user saying, I don't want any ownership changes that I make to generate those email notifications. So if I check this box and then start assigning Blakely tasks, she's not going to get the email notification because I'm doing it. Now that doesn't change how me as a user receives those email notifications. So for instance, if Blakely didn't have this checked and she was assigning me tasks, I'm still going to get those email notifications, right? So this is just happening on an individual user basis and governing the behavior when I make changes. So this gives everybody a little bit of control, but it's not, system-wide. Moving down the list, the custom clone button. Okay, so this is one that we added because we do see occasionally some confusion from folks that work in the standard Salesforce UI frequently, but deal with the TaskRay objects. And so I'm actually, to show this off, I'm going to go back here to the test drive. And I'm going to open up a place where, the majority of users, they don't even spend a lot of time, and that is the standard Salesforce interface to our TaskRay projects object. And when I open this up, all of you who are, diehard Salesforce users, this is the familiar way that you would look at the record for a project. So one of the confusions that we were running into is the standard Salesforce clone only clones one record. And that's different than the TaskRay clone, which will clone a project and all the tasks inside of it, and a lot of the good detail inside of it too as well, right? So one of the things we ran into was people were using, the standard Salesforce clone button here and then not getting at all what they expected to get. So with this new package, we are now providing this clone with tasks custom button, and you just add this to the layout of TaskRay project, and what we've done here is remove that clone button, the standard clone button, from the layout so that anybody who's here is just going to have the clone with tasks. And in fact, while we're here, we've got the time. Let me just show you. For those of you who are wondering how we would do that, let's go exactly. So we're going to go into Setup. We're going to go here under Create to get to the custom objects. We're going to open up Objects. And then we're going to scroll down here to the TaskRay project object right there. For those of you who are experienced admins, this looks very familiar. This is just how you edit, the settings on our object. But for those of you who've never been here, this is not only how you are going to add this button, but also how you would add custom fields, etc. And we're going to scroll down here to our page layout. This governs that standard Salesforce interface. And then over here under buttons. And notice that my clone with tasks has been dragged into the custom button section, and my clone button has been dragged out of the page layout. And that's all you're going to do. You're just going to make it match this. So you drag clone with tasks in, you drag clone back out, and then that will get you back to where we were here on TaskRay projects. So what's nice about having this here is that this will now behave almost as you expect it to. It's going to take the project you're cloning, it's going to take all the tasks that it contains, and it's actually going to perform a clone. Now, one thing to note, this is not doing everything that the TaskRay clone would do. Kind of necessarily, it's not as robust as the clone inside of TaskRay. So this is kind of, it's ending some of that confusion, it's getting you there, but for instance, it's not going to change the color, which is something that we implemented with this latest release. A clone now has a new color. It's not going to clone group shares. It's not going to clone contributors. So in general, you probably still want to be using the TaskRay clone off the project, detail pop-up. But for those of you who are here and always working in the Salesforce interface, this is going to get you much further than you were before. All right. Any questions on that one? Okay. Moving on. Those were the major kind of highlighted features, but you'll notice here in our release notes, there were a lot of little bugs we fixed, a lot of enhancements that we added, a lot of changes we made, and there's a lot of stuff here, some of which is just so boring and unsexy, but we're not even going to talk about it. Please feel free to go through that list. There are a few that I do want to highlight, though, particularly for experienced TaskRay users, because there are some changes in behavior that you may have gotten used to and maybe kind of we're putting up with, and now we've made it better. The first here is the top one. So our behavior with archive and hierarchy of projects, we weren't happy with what it was doing, and we heard from a few of you that you weren't happy with what it was doing. So we've enhanced what's happening there. Now, when you archive a hierarchy of projects, like all the children will also archive, and all of the tasks inside the children will also archive. So essentially, getting archived to behave as it should have, that's now fixed. The same is true in the reverse. So if you are unarchiving a parent project, also all of its children and all those tasks inside the children will also automatically unarchive. So that's a big improvement and enhancement. Some people would even call it a bug fix. But so just want to note that that's there. The next one that I want to highlight out of this list, let's see.
Public groups.
Oh yeah, public groups. This is a great one. So the ability to add, actually we're going to demo this one because it's cool. The ability to add a lot of contributors at one time is now supported through the use of public groups. So here in our test drive, we have a public group called implementations, and it just, it has 3 users inside of it. It's just a nice demo. Let's say that we create a new project. And instead of individually naming every single contributor, we're just going to say the entire implementation's public group is now a contributor. So, any public group that you have built inside of Salesforce is eligible here to be added as a contributor. And when I go ahead and do this, and now we look at our new project, notice here that all 3 members of that implementations group have been added as contributors. So this is just a really nice, easy way to add a lot of contributors, a lot of the same contributors to projects. It's also maybe a good way to think about your templates. If it's a template that always is going to be owned by the marketing team and all their contributors, you could build yourself a public group for that. Anyway, lots of different ways to use this, but just know that that is now supported. The last one I want to show off, and you guys have already seen this as I've been playing around. Let's just create a new task here to play with, and that is just it's the little things. This is an enhancement that is pretty minor, but actually I think is a huge usability win. As I drag that trash can onto the card, I get a nice big red overlay. So I am very clear about what I am selecting for delete. That's just a little improvement there, but it always feels good to us. Makes us smile. So there's a lot of other things here. Some of these things, as I said, are completely unsexy and boring. But for those of you who are admins, you may just want to scan it and make sure you see the improvements and the changes, if that's going to affect any of your users. And with that, we're just going to kind of go into a freeform Q&A, and Blakely's firing off notes to me. Okay, the next one is, when I create tasks and assign them to other users, is there a quick way to see tasks that are assigned to other users? Yeah, there is. The easiest way is actually designed right here into my board. So, my board, remember, is focused on a single user and everything that they own. So when we switch over here to my board, I'm logged in as Blakely right now. This is Blakely's view of everything that she owns. But be aware, this is good for anybody. So, for that single user that you've assigned a lot of tasks, you can actually pull up their board and see, not only that they've been assigned all the tasks, but their actual status, what they're working on, etc. So it just gives you that filter, narrowed here in this case to what's everything that Kevin's got going on. Okay, next question. Any admin steps needed to take advantage of the new features? Other than adding that clone button to the page layout, there shouldn't be much that you need. If you are actually running into a question about not seeing it or not seeing it behave the way that I've just demoed it, that's a great time to hit this feedback button and send us a quick support question, because we'll get back with you and help you get whatever you need. But yeah, other than altering that page layout, all of this should have been pretty seamless when you got the update. Let's see, any other questions? Okay, Blakely's shaking her head. Maybe we will, the last thing we wanted to do, give you guys a couple more minutes to think if you have any other questions. We've actually just got one poll that we would love to get your feedback on, and that is, I already mentioned we're thinking about a UI refresh for the first part of this year. That's going to carry with a lot of things that we're pretty excited about delivering. But always we love to get your feedback on what would be important. So we built one poll about what features you would and how you would rank them, right? So let's go ahead and fire that up. Oh, looks like it's up now. And please just give us your feedback here on the poll about what's important to you in terms of these features. Again, it just helps us get things in the right order and get the right amount of resources focused on delivering. And we've got the answers trickling in. We'll leave it open for a few more seconds for your votes. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and close it up. So thanks for that. Really appreciate your feedback, and as always, your feedback is helping us really make this a better product. So don't hesitate to let us know, even if it's not in one of these polls, to hit that feedback button. And Blakely just handed me a note that says filtering.
It's the winner.
Oh, filtering's the winner. So as a presenter here on the webinar, I can't actually see the poll. So Blakely's telling me filtering's the #1 request, and that is one of our high priorities. So that's great. We're all aligned here.
One more question. How do you unarchive a project?
Oh, last question here. How do we unarchive a project? That is a great question. Archiving is actually as simple as a checkbox. So, when we hit the archive button inside of TaskRay, what's happening is we're actually going through and being smart about checking some boxes. But really all it is checking this box. So for instance, if our new project here had been archived inside of TaskRay, this archived checkbox would be checked right now. So, the use case is we've archived a project, we've moved on with our lives, and later on we realize it's not quite done, it needs to come back out of the archive. We're just going to go ahead and search for the name of that project. And there's lots of different ways we can find it as data inside of Salesforce. Search is probably the most obvious one. But the other thing you could do would be to get to the TaskRay project tab in the standard interface and build yourself a list view. Right? The list view would return back that filtered list of projects. And in fact, you can even filter in your list view on everything that is archived, since that is a checkbox. So lots of different ways you could go find it. Once you found it, you're just going to uncheck that box. And of course, with this new release, we're going to behave exactly as you would expect us to believe when you uncheck that box. So we're going to uncheck, all the boxes on all the tasks inside this project. We're also going to uncheck all the archive checkboxes on any child projects and on any tasks inside those child projects. And it looks like that's it. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you again for your business. We really appreciate you as customers. And again, just because we're not on a webinar doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. This feedback link inside of TaskRay does come directly back to our team. Feel free to hit that for the most minor of things. We'd love to hear from you.